So I'm going to go over how to rig and animate um, a vehicle, such as a plane or car. It's different than the method that I use or typically use to rig and animate characters. Uh, I find that this method is it's cleaner and it's more it's just easier to work with mechanical objects. So normally when you're creating bones for a character, you just do do it like this, like assuming you're not using biped, like a character bone setup typically looks like this. Like you start from the root. So this is kind of stupid. Like so, say I'm making somebody's spine like this, right? So you start from there, and then you want to add his arms. Like you would probably want to add it from, I guess, the top of his neck here, I guess. So the point I'm trying to make is you're basically making a chain of bones that are all connected to one bit, like they're all connected in this manner. And like if you rotate like that, it's like it rotates as you expect. But the thing that it's not good for mechanical objects is for some mechanical objects you actually want to move this and not be constrained uh, in this manner. Like you'll notice that I can't really stretch it out basically. Um, I mean, there's things that you can do to set it up so it can stretch by editing the bone tools and that kind of stuff. But for all intents and purposes, this is not the method I like to use when I'm rigging up a mechanical object such as this. One of the reasons I like to rig it up this method is also I end up using less bones. So, um, anyways, enough chit chat. I'm just gonna get right into how I do it. So, just basically define which parts you want to animate. So, for example, uh, this is a pretty complex gear setup here. So, I'm just gonna start with the top bone here with the gear. Just do that. Now, I want to delete this end node because I don't need that when I'm exporting to a game engine because it's it's it really it hurts performance when you have too many bones that are not necessary. So that end joint actually is it kind of identifies as its own bone when you export it into Unreal. So you can go ahead and delete that. So once I create the bone, let's just do that again. So I create the bone, and so it looks like this. Make sure your settings should look like that. And just start, and then just click the endpoint, and then again press delete on that. Now once I create it, I go into animation and then go to bone tools, and I just turn off bone on. So I do that because it allows me to just easily move the bones around um, without running into any issues later on, and I can also like stretch it later on. But anyways, that's just something that I like to do. So once you do that, you just copy and paste another to another bone that you'd like to move it, and then just line it up like that. Now you can go ahead and stretch it like so. Now once you're done stretching it, you should reset the scale like that. Just make sure the scale is reset. Don't click on transform because that'll reset the rotation, which is not what you want either. You want to keep this rotation because you basically want it's information that you want to export. So it's important to keep that information. So just reset the scale whenever you do anything with scale. So I also want to animate that piston here that goes in and out. So let's just copy and drag. I guess it starts. Doesn't really matter actually, to be honest. You can put it down here, but just for, I guess, I like to just put it where the piston begins. So let's just do that right there. And then reset, and then let's just shrink this one a bit more. Scale. Now notice they're not linked yet, but I'm going to link them later on. I'll explain how I do that. Yeah. And then let's do the wheels. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I should be copying and pasting. Yeah. Copy, paste. Now, if you want to be exact about the rotations, you can actually just go to view, and then you can see the rotation here, just like 0 or something like that. Yeah, also, one thing about like when you're rigging wheels or things that spin like in a cycle, kind of like wheels or turbines or blades or something like that, you want to make sure that your bone is exactly at the center of the mesh. Because if it isn't, when it spins in a 360, it'll look it'll just basically look like the wheels kind of misaligned. Basically, it won't rotate in a uniform fashion about its axis. So to make sure that it's exactly in the center of the mesh, what I like to do is I like to take the wheel out. So basically just detach the mesh, and then we'll attach it later, so don't worry. Okay, actually, yeah, let's just put it right in the middle of everything. So yeah, detach the wheels. God, this thing's hard to work with. Okay, I don't want to rotate that rod, but I'm just going to rotate that. And let's just rotate that. And then, yeah, detach. Detach from mesh. Make sure it's not 2-element, but it's actually a separate mesh. So now that it's a separate mesh, you can just, and then let's just isolate that. Let's take a look at that. Sorry. Let's just take a look at these two objects. So now you want to click on that mesh. Make sure that its pivot is centered to object. So now its pivot is exactly in the center of the mesh. And then now you want to take this guy, and then you want to align it to this mesh. So now you want to align the pivot points. So pivot points align. The orientation, no, you don't. Obviously, because this mesh doesn't really have a proper orientation. So yeah, that should be it. Now this pivot should be exactly at the center of the mesh. So when you rotate it, the wheel's gonna spin as if it was properly in the middle. So now that that's done, uh, let's do that for the other meshes, I guess. So let's detach that, and detach that, and then this, drag click, and then align this to another bone like that. Oh, sorry, what did I? What the fuck? Oh, okay, cause I didn't center the two objects. So yeah, we gotta center these pivots as well, because yeah, they weren't centered. So now just align like that. Okay, so now we've got 3 bones for the wheels that should be centered. Now once that's done, you want to attach the mesh back to it. It's like that, so it's one mesh. Excuse me. Okay, so that's done. Next thing I want to animate is this thing right here. Now this one, I'm not too worried that it's exactly in the center of the pivot, because it's not gonna rotate like 360, right? Okay, that's not how this joint works. So it's okay if it's a little bit off. People aren't gonna notice it too much, so I wouldn't worry about it being exactly centered. I only do that for things that spin in a cycle, like blades or wheels. So let's center that, transfer, reset scale, and then that done. Okay, reset scale, and then yeah, let's do this wire here. Now for things like wires, actually you don't want to, you actually want to set it up as one chain. So to do that, you just click on bones again and just start where you want to, where you would want to start animating it. So let's, you don't have to go all the way like super precise with these wires. You know, it's like that. Okay, so now we've created that chain. Now we've got to, now with a wire like this, I want to use, I like to use something called an IK solver. So let's just unhide that and then clean it from there. Now IK solvers kind of, they look like this. So you start from there. So to create an IK solver, you create your bone chain, and then you got to create a spline, right? Because I'm going to be using this spline as a guide for how this thing animates. Now like, you don't actually have to create the spline exactly the way the bone is set up. Like you don't have to create like 7 different spline points for this thing. Uh, I like to actually keep like, just to keep the controls simple when I'm animating. I just use like, you know, as like like just as few as possible, but trying to keep it the shape, so it looks kind of like that, kind of like the original chain. So like you'll notice I'm skipping a few bones like here, like that. You'll see why when I'm done. Okay, so now I've created that spline. I want to make sure that this is set to not corner, but something like Bezier, I guess. Bezier is good, yeah. Or let's see, smooth is fine. All right, so now that that's done, you want to create the IK spline solver. So to do that, you just click on the tip of your IK chain, and then go to IK solver and go to spline IK solver. Now it's asking you to pick the endpoint. You click on that. Now you've got to click on the actual spline that's going to be used to control this this uh, chain of bones. So now what it's done is it's actually gone and created an IK solver, an IK spline solver. So with this, you can actually use these little boxes here to actually animate it. So it's much easier than actually animating it using forward kinematics, where you'd have to click on this and then you'd rotate the bone and rotate the bone. So this is by having these control points here, you can just move them like that, and uh, the bone will follow in a kind of a natural spline-like motion kind of thing. So when I was creating this, when I was creating the original spline, I mentioned that I don't create exactly the amount of points that I have bones, because when I animate it, I don't want to animate each little bone. It's kind of tedious. I just want to animate a few control points. So it creates a control point at every vertex in the spline. So because I created 5 vertices, it's created 5 of these control points. So yeah, so it's a bit easier to animate than having to move like 7 or 8 or however many bones are actually in the rig. So yeah. So once that's done, let's unhide this thing. Oops, yeah, we probably want to line it up. So let's just, to line it up, you can just select everything and then just move it all over there. Actually, wait, no, it's actually, you just actually, with this thing, you actually just want to move the root bone. So, let's see. Yeah, these things are a bit weird. I think you just select, yeah, okay. You just select the root control bone and just move it like that. Yeah, don't, like, when you create an IK spline chain like this, don't just select everything and move it, and then it just fucks up. Just, so yeah, you just want to just move the end bone, yeah, like that. Move it into place where the wires are. Yeah, like that. All right, so I'm not gonna bother like setting up bones for all of this. It's kind of like, you kind of get the gist of it. It's basically, so to set up this piston here, you'd probably just set it up the same way that you. Okay, you know what? I'll just do one of them. God, it's gonna take forever if I did all of them. So let's just do one. So let's just set it up over there. God, this damn plane is complicated. Move it there. Actually, let's just hide everything except Okay, line it up like that. Okay, that's close enough. Oh, no, it's not. It's hard working perspective mode, but I have to work in perspective because this stupid joint is not, it's not aligned like orthogonally. Like it's not like exactly. Like, yeah, get my point. Okay, all right. Let's create this second chain. All right, good enough. Make sure it's in the middle of the. So, yeah. Okay, so now we're gonna go about parenting all of these things, right? All of these bones. What's this? Oh, that was the main arm. Okay, sorry, that should be over there then. All right. So I like to create parent it to a single root bone. So let's just create a root bone here, and let's just set its rotation to be zeroed out. Oh no, let's make sure it's facing that way. So it's kind of like, okay, so I'll just like call this the, I should probably zero. Make sure that all of these are reset. All right, so now let's go ahead and name these bones. This one, let's just call it the root plane. Yeah, this one is the, I think that was the leg. Uh, Gear leg. And this is like some kind of a strut one. Strut one. Sub. Okay, and then this one is another strut. Strut two. Two sub. Alright, this is the wheel, so let's just call it wheel one. Two, three. Alright, so just create one more bone here. Because I know that this thing is gonna go up and down like shocks. So let's call this the gear shock. And then these are just the wires. Wire one, two, three, four, 6, 7. Okay. All right. Okay, so now let's parent all of this. Yeah. Okay. So this is going to be our root here. So we kind of want all of this rooted to chain to that. But let's do it in a manner that makes sense for this plane. So this piece here, okay, so this piece is kind of attached to the wing, so I don't want to, I want to animate it separate from this bone here. Yeah, okay, so, alright, I'm gonna make this the root of the plane. I'm gonna make this, link this one to the plane. And this one's gonna link to that one. And then this one's gonna link to that one. And then this one is gonna link to that one. This one's gonna link to, oh sorry, this one. And these wheels are gonna be linked to the shocks. And then, like that. Now this IK thing is a bit tricky. I'll show you how to do that after I link this last piston here. This one actually, no, it's gonna go to that one. Yeah. I didn't name this one, did I? Yeah, okay, well this is strut 3. Sub. Okay, so that's all linked. And then yeah, so the IK chain. Now this one's a bit tricky, but basically you want to select the chain, the spline, and the bones, and you just want to make sure that they're children of whatever bone you want to link them to. So now so we want to link them to, make sure it's linked to the gear leg. So we're going to select the wire, we're going to select the point, the line, and the chain, and then make sure select child nodes, and we're just going to go ahead and drag all of that to the gear leg. Right there. So now when the gear leg moves like so, it should move all of that. Oops, sorry, I didn't link this gear shock. All right, there. Yeah. So now when the gear leg moves, yeah, it's gonna follow the chain, and the IK chain is gonna follow. So now the way that the gear animates, it kind of closes in like that, like that, and then as it closes in, these struts kind of follow it, kind of thing. Right? So that's kind of why I didn't link this one to the leg, because it's just easier to animate when I do it like this. Yeah. Because this strut here is actually attached to the wing. It's not attached to this leg here. So okay, so that's done. We can go ahead and okay, no, let's just make sure it's linked to the parent here. Yeah, so they're all linked together. Now they're all good. All right, cool. Okay, now my next video, I'm gonna go over how to rig this mesh, this big mesh here to these bone joints here.